You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Homefield Apparel.
Saw the games, physical basketball is at the games. Versus you were not. You watched them on YouTube. Anyway. I saw the games. I watched the games at the
Welcome to X's and Joe's. I'm Bob Moats. Doing a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball.
You nailed it, Bob.
I can't believe I just, hey, let's try that again. Well, we're here. I'm Bob Moats. Welcome to X's and Joe's, a podcast dedicated to decoding the winning formula in college basketball. Take two. We got
Take two. Yeah. And I'm Mike Weemuth. I welcome you to episode 55, we think. The 2026 college basketball season in review, recorded live on the afternoon of Tuesday, March 10th, 2026. So, Robert, we finally made it to our favorite non-Christmas time of the year. Brackets are what, like 114 hours away now? So have you started your food hoarding for the next 3 weeks?
Not yet. I figure, with between some of the Grubhub type of options, as well as, and plus we have enough snacks here to feed the Roman army. When you have a 3-year-old who doesn't know what to eat all the time, you want to have multiple choices to throw at him to just, and then just kind of get through the tantrum. And then when they finally exhaust himself on the 8th option, you can give him the cheesy poop or whatever. But yeah, we're ready to go. How about you? I mean, are you ready to roll at this point?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's, we're just talking before the show started. It's great how you can get so invested in teams and conferences that during the regular season you could hardly even knew existed. Yeah, I mean, I never. You told me at the beginning of the season that I would be staying up to watch the Hofstra Townsend semifinal game with absolute like glued intent. Like I would probably think you were crazy. So, and that game was amazing. I mean, it ended on a banked 3-pointer with 0.3 seconds to go. So I think the great thing is that sometimes you can tell if you're going to have a good March Madness by what happens during conference week, where you actually get some last second winners and some upsets. At least seems so far. Things have actually been pretty entertaining, and hopefully it'll kind of make up for last year, because the one sort of drag that people experienced last March was just that the NCAA tournament was just like the chalkboard. It was just favorites just winning left and right.
And that's one I think we'll probably talk about next week when the bracket comes out, and hopefully have somebody to help us out with that a little bit. But I would say this, and we're going to talk about this a lot during this episode. It's a thing of what we're beginning to notice is the distinction between the tiers in college basketball, I think, has never been more apparent.
Mm-hmm.
That the top 2% versus the top next 3 to the next 10, there are some clear fissure points in those areas, in those in those conversations. And the one great thing about these small conference, low major conference tournaments, and Brian Tonsoni mentioned this last year, and it never really kind of registered with me, because as we talked about tournament expansion, which I'm going to talk about why I don't like it later in the episode, I think, or maybe Monday next week, whichever one we'll fit it in some point. But for a lot of these small teams that win, that get the 16 and 15, basically it's like, congratulations, you just picked the end of your season on this date. For the most part, statistically speaking, you're not going to make it. But I think the big thing for those programs and those teams, it is something that we've actually. I think for these teams, I think it's important for them to have a big win like that, because for winning the conference tournament to them is like for a lot of programs winning a national championship. I know that was a very long way to get to a very simple point, but
yeah. I mean, it's like in high school, you have the smaller teams winning their sectional is like something they may remember for decades. especially if they just have no history of doing it. So you're absolutely right. I mean, you have to kind of like index the expectations based upon the size of the school. So one thing I was curious about, and obviously, we're talking about the teams, the tournaments, and all the players we're kind of looking forward to. Also, obviously, the coaching carousel has begun anew already.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, as history nerds, I would only ask this of someone like you. Do you find it kind of interesting that the Ides of March is the time when athletic departments begin their ritualized public shanking of their underperforming coaches right into unemployment?
Did Caesar? Caesar obviously didn't make it out of Scottsdale, right? That Arizona State, right?
Yeah.
The suburbs of Phoenix. I mean, congratulations, Dan Hurley, for winning the 21st century in the family. So that being
revenge.
You got two, I got two. What's your point, little bro? I got mine later.
Yeah.
I think, and I didn't need Christian Leitner to do it, but I think a lot of it is interesting that it is March. It is the Ides of March. It's the most tumultuous weather period, pretty much in across the Midwest and really across the country. And I think it is interesting that you start seeing that the shanking of coaches has begun. And more to come, I would imagine. But, and again, something we'll talk about later in another episode that we're going to be doing in the off season. We're going to be talking about how the windows are closing very rapidly for a lot of coaches. Like Jerome Tang, who National Coach of the Year, gets fired midseason this year, 4 years down the road. So it is interesting, to say the least, that it does happen this time of year.
Yeah, that'll be an interesting conversation. We'll hopefully get a guest friend from the network on that one. But the fact that honeymoons are just compressing so much, and the expectations of year one are ramping up at the same time, and it's it's fascinating, and it mirrors what we've seen on the football side. And what we talked about with the Signetti effect, and you're kind of wondering, how is that leaking over into basketball? And not just because of Signetti, but other year one coaches or year two coaches that are kind of killing it. So that'll be a fun conversation.
It will be. So before we go any further, wanted and Mike shared this originally with me. We joined with the Doniger family in Indiana University in mourning the passing of Clarence Doniger. He was athletic director in the 1990s at IU. Before that, he was on the 1957 Big Ten Championship men's basketball team, while at the same time he was serving as a student body president of the institution. Clarence gave a lifetime of service to IU in varieties of capacities, actually not just as a student, but also as an alumni, and then as an employee, then working for the institution later in his life. It's important to note that when you look at Clarence's tenure, one of the big things with him was promoting gender equity at IU and really getting the university and the institution on track for basically a 50-50 split of scholarship athletes in men's and women's sports. It was not an easy task by any stretch of the imagination. And he had a great deal to do with those processes and making things happen in that area. I'd also just like to say I knew him not well, but well enough to say that I believed him always to be a good man, and was always very magnanimous and gracious in working with students from all different areas and people from all different areas. You got what you got with Clarence, and you always felt like he was at least a straight dealer and a straight shooter. And we just join everyone in mourning his passing and thank him and his family for his service to the institution over the course of his long and very, very fruitful life.
Absolutely. So let's move forward.
Homefield.
Let's do some Homefield.
Yeah. So Homefield Apparel, sponsor of the Back Home Network. Mike, have you seen anything recently on Homefield that's an interesting jump out for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're kind of getting into the warmer weather sports. So obviously baseball, I think, is going to be the thing that you're starting to see a little bit more of. I told you last episode about the hockey hoodies that have come out. And so that's something definitely off the heels of the U.S. Olympic hockey team, both men's and women's, winning the gold medals. Definitely something to check out. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to the baseball stuff because it's especially as someone who used to watch like ESPN and there used to be another like old sports network that would like broadcast college baseball in like the 80s and 90s, and so you could kind of like barely pick up like an Arizona State game here and there. As someone that was just absolutely loved to watch those games, especially those jerseys, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what Homefield comes out with in the next few weeks.
Agreed. And notice that they have the basketball shorts now, which I think is incredibly interesting because now we're at the time of year where I just wear shorts pretty much between now and Halloween. Just having another option that's not a khaki or navy blue or black pair that I wear on the golf course, but something I can wear around the house to grill out, whatever. And
do you wear
that available.
I believe you told me this before. Do you wear Crocs while you're doing these activities?
I do wear Crocs. I'm not wearing them now. I'm wearing my OCs now, which again, just a great footwear. But yeah, I went away from flip flops a few years ago because nobody wants to look at my toes, and if you know, you know. But the Crocs work out really well for me. So yeah, but I never wear Crocs with socks because there are some lines I'm not going to pass into middle agehood.
Well, you're going to be 51 soon, and so you still got another decade before you move up to socks and Crocs. So we'll get you there. Don't worry.
I should duly note we have friends of ours who are close to our age that started that about 5 years ago. So there are some, but most of our friends prematurely middle aged and prematurely eldered. A lot faster than the actual usual number of the population.
We had many friends in college that should have been AARP members by then. So.
I think a few of them were. They actually falsified the birth certificate so they could get the discounts.
Exactly.
So anyway, well, again, but yeah, go to www.homefieldapparel.com to check out what they have, and also, or you can check them out at Homefield at Tracks in Bloomington on Kirkwood.
Yep. And when we come back, we'll get started. We'll do a full review of the 2026 regular season college basketball season next on X's and Joe's.
Hoosier Nation, are you tired of the same old takes? Say hello to Crimson Cast, the podcast that actually knows IU sports. Hosted by Galen Clavio and Scott Caulfield, they serve up sharp analysis, real talk, and just enough sarcasm to keep things interesting. Game previews? Check. Instant reactions? Double check. History lessons that make even our losses worth remembering? You bet. So whether you're tailgating at Memorial Stadium, pacing around Assembly Hall, or just avoiding Purdue fans, Crimson Cast has you covered. Search Crimson Cast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and join the conversation today.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Bob Moats with my good friend Mike Weemuth, and we're going to be talking about kind of our year in review show, regular season in review show, now that the conference tournaments are on the majors, high majors getting hot and heavy, ready to go, and maybe the low and mid majors have already started or in some cases concluded. But Mike, I'm going to start with this, with the Big Ten. We're talking about the Big Ten first, because I feel like this year, we talked about this with Caulfield at the beginning of the season when we talked about one shining moment. We kind of parlayed that into why the Big Ten hasn't been back since, I don't know, the Clinton administration, or hasn't won one since the Clinton administration.
Yeah.
This year feels like we got some opportunities to maybe have a national champion.
Yeah, well, one specifically, but yeah, there's definitely a really strong inside angle for finally breaking that bubble.
I'd argue too. I'd argue Illinois is on that list too. I think Illinois has a chance to maybe pull it off in the way that they, as good as they are offensively.
Yeah, that's an interesting theory because you're right. I mean, like Illinois is 26 on defense in KenPom, but they're number one on offense. And so the theory would be, are they so good at offense they can make up for it? It'd basically be, again, checking off the box for this week. That Baylor team that won the national championship in 2021, they were very much the same. I think that Baylor team was number one in offense and like 32nd in KenPom defense. So it would be very much in that sort of configuration, given that all the teams that have won the national championship in the last, 10, 15 years have all been top 10 in KenPom offense and defense, with the exception of that one.
So I just put up their I just put up their scouting report, I just want you to look at that and ask yourself, why are they 26th in defense with an adjusted efficiency margin, or defensive efficiency of 99.1? What's the one thing that stands out to you as being, man, that's what's holding them back?
Ooh,
looking specifically at the 4 factors.
Yeah, I can't. I'd have to look a little close. Given that I am also now 50,
Oh yeah, you can't see it. Okay.
Yeah.
So they are.
What number do you see there? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, the big red one on turnover percentage at 11.7.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And so they don't turn their opponents over at a rate that's even close to being, elite, if at all. So we're talking 1 out of 10 possessions are getting a turnover.
Yeah.
And they're also getting them, half of them as dead balls. So that's one factor. The other thing I think that's important here is they don't foul. They rebound the ball extremely well, and they're holding their opponents to under 50% EFG.
Yeah, they're number 1 nationally in free throws surrendered. So basically, you're just not going to get a margin on them from the 3-throw line at all.
And if you look at the new one that KenPom's keeping, which is the average 2-point distance, they're 12th in the country at 7.0. So they're basically keeping guys out of the lane. They're not getting as many at the rim because they are effective, even though they don't block the ball. Actually, their blocks are pretty solid, but they don't block it at a level that really they don't really block it at a level that really is. That better for you?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Okay. So
my old eyes.
they don't block it at a level that they block it at a decent enough level is what I'm trying to say.
A lot of it's just visual. I mean, like anytime you have a 7'2" center that actually has some mobility, like both the Visich brothers have, then I mean that's going to at least dissuade a lot of typical teams in terms of dribble penetration. So Michigan obviously has the exact same thing. It's just a little bit more extreme since, Mara is like 2 inches taller than even the Visich brothers.
So I throw out that. So again, I would throw out with Illinois. They shoot the ball extremely well. They don't let their opponent shoot it as well. They're still top 10% in those areas. They don't foul. They rebound extremely well, and they do great on assists.
They're 18th in offensive rebounds, which really helps for those 3-point shooters they have.
Let me rephrase that. They're not great on assists, but they do a lot well. Yeah. And I think the backtrack is in the right bracket with the right situation, especially we'll talk about Duke later, but especially with some of the injuries down the pike, I'd say Illinois is one to watch. But I think the obvious choice, though, for if you're looking at the team that really, I think, really has a chance to break the seal, it's Michigan.
Yeah.
What do you think about Michigan? Like, when you look at Michigan, what do you think their biggest weakness would be?
The biggest weakness? I'm sorry about that. The tough thing with them is that they seem to really hit so many of the metrics that I look for in terms of like a team that's going to be extremely effective in March. There's one metric that I think I may have told you about this one, and it's probably the one I've started to track much more as time goes by in terms of what's correlating to effectiveness in March. It's field goal percentage disparity. Basically, the field goal percentage that your team shoots versus what they give up. And Michigan is a very extreme case of a team that is shooting it at a very high level, but also suppressing their team at a very high level in terms of keeping their field goal percentage down. Michigan basically shoots, it's the 7th best field goal percentage in the country. They're at 51%. Defensively, they're the 2nd best in the country in terms of suppressing field goal percentage, 38%. That's a full 13% gap in terms of what they're surrendering versus what they're actually hitting themselves. And you're noticing just consistently across the board, that's where the best teams are kind of hitting at about 11, 12, 13%. Arizona's at 12% gap right now. They're 13th in the country shooting, 7th in the country at limiting shooting. Duke's they're at a gap of 12 too. I mean, they're like 20th in the country at field goal percentage and 8th in the country at suppressing. So yeah, I mean, that's, the thing that stands out for me is just like they're crazy efficient. We can get into a second about like why we think that, but what's your take in terms of what you think their potential weaknesses are?
This is hard. It really is. I think their biggest weakness would be some of the physicality they ran up to against Duke would be probably the biggest one.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that, Cheddar and Morris Johnson can't bang, but Duke really kind of took to them. They did an incredible job of keeping their offense. I think it was the only time their offense scored under 70 points all season was against Duke. No, I'm sorry, there's TCU up there at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
But since right after Veterans Day, they've been scoring consistently over 70 and most times 80 points, 90 points a game.
Yeah.
And this was, to me, kind of the big thing would be the physicality portion that they may be like, if they run up against, let's say, a Houston, they could run into problems with that. Would be my concern.
Yeah, they don't create a ton of turnovers, and I guess their offensive rebounding is decent, but not amazing. But yeah, but you're talking about like these aren't even weak. Those aren't really even weaknesses. Those are more they're just kind of like okay at those versus where they're elite at everything else.
Yeah. I was just thinking, you think more on the physical attributes would be my thing. I mean, but again, you're looking at their strength of schedule was 7th in the country according to Ken Palm, overall 4th.
Yeah.
So 4th overall and 10th non-conference, they were 29-2. So they know how to win, and I mean that's a big element for this program. And
yeah,
they're deep. That's the other thing. They are deep. They can go, I believe, 9-10 deep easily.
Yeah, well, I mean, they lost Sandin, so yeah, I mean, they lost at least one player, but yeah, they're still at least 8 deep, with guys that have been there a while too.
Right. So you've got some definite advantages going in, and you have multiple guys who shoot the ball extremely well from 3 and at decent volumes. So that's a plus for them.
The one thing I would say about Michigan that when I try to sort of like do a very easy and quick schematic of like what makes them kind of freakish. I think you saw that in the Purdue game, and I think we talked about this, at some length, that I don't know if I've ever seen a college basketball team where they could take their 4, put him on the other team's point guard, and effectively switch between the 3 and the 4 and still be taller than everyone else. and with your center who's 7'4" standing back, basically playing free safety in case anything leaks through. That some of those plays where Purdue is running their standard kind of standard go-to bread and butter play, which is basically a ball screen action with
short roll. Yeah, okay.
Exactly, with Braden Smith, where he gets the screen from TKR, and then TKR like short rolls. And in this game, they actually had Luxembourg on Braden Smith. Now Braden's like 6'1", maybe. Luxembourg is 6'9", a 7'2" wingspan.
I was going to say with the wingspan of a condor.
Exactly. And then what? So, but when they do that screen action, then Lindenborg just dropped off on TKR, and then Merez Johnson took over. And Merez Johnson again is about 6'9", 7'1" wingspan. It's like all basically the problem with Michigan is like none of the angles that work against any other team work against Michigan. They're just like, you literally just find yourself facing this wall of defense that where you're just a lot of times forced to take really bad shots late in the shot clock, and that's a big problem that I think teams are going to face against them.
And then you're putting Elliot Cadeau out on a 2 or a 3 in some cases. Like your secondary driver now has basically a high level point guard guarding a secondary ball handler. Yeah. So, I mean, that really kind of, again, you talk about disrupting on offense, they can do that. I will mention real quick about what I regret, Mark, what we say is on up here about too quick to fall in love with their 3-point offense rather than play inside out. I think that's a risk for a lot of teams. And I think if a team can figure out how to kind of do that, that would be a situation like we're talking about, where a team is playing them so physically that Michigan's afraid or isn't able. They settle more in their offense versus trying to attack out of their actions, attack downhill out of their actions. I think they're less susceptible to being hit by that than, let's say, in Nebraska, or even in Illinois in many respects. So I think Illinois relies a lot on 3-point shooting. But I think in this situation, I think that is a concern. If a team can figure out how to keep them outside and force them to settle, they stand a good chance of beating them.
Yeah, one of the things I look at a little bit more now is the ratio of 3-point shots to 2-point shots with a lot of these offenses, and Mark's right. I mean, I think there's an issue where certain teams, I think, do find themselves when they're going up against teams that are right at parallel with them in terms of their length, athleticism, physicality, where they may be forced, they just may not have the same access to getting into the lane and getting post touches, and where they're just jacking up threes, where the other team that has maybe just a little bit more ability to get down in the post or penetrate, there's a little bit more of an advantage for those teams that have greater let's say diversity of shot options. So I think that's definitely something to consider.
And speaking of that, because we quickly bringing up Nebraska, and that was this was again, were you kind of surprised by Nebraska this year and how they performed?
I thought they would.
I was.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they would have. I thought they were one of those teams that had a high ceiling just because, again, how they play. But also at the same time, I was not blown away by their, let's say their post capability. I kind of assumed they would be pretty good at shooting threes. I didn't know how well they would be at doing all the other stuff. So I think that's kind of displayed itself at certain times versus certain kind of teams, like when they lost to Purdue, let's say.
Yeah, and I would also kind of throw in the fact that I looking at this statistical profile, I think this was exactly what Indiana would have wanted to be, going into the season. This looks, I think, what Indiana was hoping to look like.
Yeah.
Even with the bad offensive rebounding numbers, knowing full well where that was. I think that they're a better defensive team. I mean, I think that's the difference between, again, we want to talk about the difference between number 12 or 11 in KenPom versus 41 in KenPom. It's that defensive element that they just did a really good job of defending for what they had. And especially looking at their 3-point defense, they really guard the perimeter well.
Yeah.
And
I think they're 15th in the country in 3-point defense. So that's where you're right, Bob. That's kind of where I think their distinction comes in. And I mean, they do have their scoring capacity is a little bit more spread out versus IU as well. I mean, Sanford, Mast, and Lawrence. I mean, that's kind of like what you want in terms of ideal sort of breakdown and offensive capacity. Having your small guard that can score, having your wing that can score, and having a big that can score. So that's kind of the ideal distribution if you can get it.
And if when we do our post-mortem on IU here in a few weeks, we'll be talking about that a little more in detail. I think IU thought they had that, and it did not work out as planned. Right. So so I was just I quickly wanted to hit them. I'm also going to quickly talk about. I'd like to talk quickly about Wisconsin. I'm trying to find them very close. Well, there they are. Boom. Got to always look for the early games. So Wisconsin really kind of turned it around in many respects as the season went on. I think there's still an inconsistency with them that kind of showed throughout the year. But I don't know. I think a lot of it with Wisconsin is when we see how they've evolved as a program, especially with areas like pace and tempo.
Yeah.
I think they've been fairly successful in doing that.
Yeah, well, I mean, they still do a lot of the same stuff that
just faster.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they still don't turn the ball over, which is obviously a staple of the Bo Ryan system. But you're right. I mean, they do it faster because their players are just faster. Well, at least let me put it this way: their guards are faster than they've ever been. The bigs are basically similar in design and size, except they just shoot a little bit better than they used to. I mean, Ethan
Right.
Happ isn't exactly like the bigs that Wisconsin has right now. Like Winter
Nolan Winter
and
Rapp.
and Rapp. I mean, those guys are legitimate 3-point threats. And yeah, I mean, you saw that. I mean, obviously the game they had just this last weekend at Purdue is probably sort of the highlight of their seeing their system operate as Greg Gard was hoping it would. That you could basically get downhill pressure with Boyd and Blackwell, and then spreading the other teams out and having your bigs effectively just stretching the floor and hitting shots. So it's and yeah, and unfortunately that's been kind of I'm sure we can talk about Purdue at some other time, but Purdue kind of became susceptible to those exact kind of teams. It's like that. What Wisconsin did to Purdue is exactly what Iowa State did to Purdue. So you had bigs that can shoot from distance and pulled TKR and Clough out of the middle and allowed Boyd to do what he wanted, the same way Tamar Lipsey did earlier in the season. So yeah, with Wisconsin, you're right, Bob. I would say it's a really good thing for the conference that Wisconsin is starting to play like this. If we're trying to get out of the mode that the Big Ten is viewed as a tackle basketball conference, there's probably no better sign that we may be escaping that, I guess, perception nationally than the fact that Wisconsin is now like putting up huge numbers in terms of their offensive productivity, and just points per game is just completely different than whatever they've had from decades past.
And to kind of transition that, because a team that actually might go into that sort of the Big Ten plays slow narrative, Iowa. And it's been interesting kind of watching Ben McCollum. I'm going to put up our good friend Hooperazzi put this one up here. I think the same thing is true in many respects of Ben McCollum.
Yeah.
That DeVries' dad is welcome to the Big Ten moment. He had a couple stretches of losing 4 or 5 games. I think McCollum had a similar problem at times throughout the season as well. I think looking at the last, month, as well as transitioning into the calendar year with Minnesota, Illinois, and Purdue, and then just beating Indiana as badly as they did at Assembly Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And then going to the next step where now you look at kind of who they were playing, losing to Maryland and losing to Penn State, in addition to losses to Purdue, Michigan, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. There are flaws in this sort of approach where you're trying to control too much from a tempo standpoint.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of saw that with Nebraska, with Iowa this year.
Do you remember, Bob, when McCollum was being rumored as a possible candidate for IU? What we were saying, or at least what we were debating about in terms of like, okay, if McCollum comes to the Power 5 school, like, or in the Big Ten, whether it's IU, Iowa, whatever, is he actually going to speed up any? And I think my view was, my view was that, I think my view was he would improve, but only for the fact that he was literally in last place of his last year in terms of adjusted tempo. So he literally had nowhere else to go but up. And the good news is he actually did go up. He went up to 358th in adjusted tempo this year. So he's a whole 7 spots.
And it goes counter to kind of what he wants to do, because he says we play slow offense so we can slow our opponent down on defense. And they do have a lower average possession length, but I think they had some teams get quicker shots against them this year than what they were used to getting in a McCollum system. So that's, I mean, it's almost like, you kind of want that to be reversed, that you are playing offense a bit faster than you're playing defense. Yeah. But that kind of does that. So
I think the issue with them is that it's not really a surprise where they finished, because if you think about it, that was the core of the team he had from Drake, right? Yeah. I mean, basically, like, I think 6 of his top 7 players he pulled in from Drake, and that was an 11 seed team. And now it's a 9 seed team. So he's basically in the same zone of where you would expect based upon what the roster was coming in. I mean, he added Fulgeras and Koch, so that's, a little bit of a bump. But yeah, I think Iowa has just been too top heavy all year. I mean, it's Sturtz shouldering way too much of the load. Banks on occasion is really good. Obviously, we saw that firsthand when he put up 29, 30 points against IU, but he's not doing that every night. And then there's a big drop off to the rest of the roster in terms of their productivity. And so, I think that they've kind of settled, I think, about where they should be.
And they're not going to be there next year, Sturtz and Banks. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in year 2 at Iowa.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's being reloaded. And I'm going to quickly just bring up UCLA. Just kind of, I think there's some similarities there.
Yeah.
From a record standpoint, I use a few possessions away from being in the same club, against these guys, and really kind of close to that, from a structural standpoint. But I mean, I think were the expectations there higher than what they ended up with?
Well, yeah, I mean, they were top 25 coming in terms of AP poll, and they didn't finish that high. They're going to be, whatever seed I think they're set at now. I think they wanted more out of some of their secondary guys. They already knew that Bilodeau and Dent were, and they got out of those guys about what you'd expect. Dent's kind of an up and down player, but he's, can occasionally be clutch here and there. But I think it's the other guys. I don't think they got as much out of Bailey, Booker, and some of the other supporting cast, maybe as much as they were expecting. And so I think that's just kind of kept the lid on them. And I mean, UCLA is just a weird school overall because there is high expectations, but I still don't know how their particular coach right now fits into that environment. And it feels like it's a marriage that is on the way to divorce court, if not now, sometime in the near future.
That's an interesting way to put it, because, we talk about, the unofficial, here, I think we're talking about UCLA, right? That Cronin really doesn't always doesn't always just kind of mold to his environment. And you're in Los Angeles, California. It's one thing if you're in Cincinnati, and I think he plays better in Cincinnati than in LA.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of the sort of players that he's going to have to get from the West Coast are going to not exactly be as, if he's looking at the recruiting standpoint of people who would want to play at UCLA, it's going to be kind of hard for him to kind of mesh the two of them together. I think Musselman is probably, exactly what I'm trying to say. Thank you. He's really trying to do a good job. I think Musselman does a much better job of kind of catering to that than Cronin does in that environment. So I think UCLA is in a position where I think you're right that it's a matter of, we'll have to just kind of see where it goes. But I think that it may be towards the end of it than the beginning.
Yeah. That's understandable. I mean, if you ever driven on the 405, during rush hour, then you totally understand where the anger comes from.
Totally get it. So let's go below Indiana on this, because I think we did a pretty good job of hitting everybody else. And we'll obviously get back to Purdue at some point, and we'll bring up Michigan State at some point, and Ohio State. Well, they're still there. We talked about them a little bit on Assembly Call. So what we said on that is probably what would probably be sufficient for what we talk about here. But Minnesota on down, I think Minnesota had a really, for them, an unexpected good season. But if you, I shouldn't say unexpected, we knew Nico Medved would do a good job doing what he did. But there is a distinct drop here at Indiana at 18 and 13 of the net ratings, if you notice.
Yeah.
That it's, granted Washington, so it's about, you got 13 going that direction. And in fact, you can even argue from Indiana on down, there's a pretty distinguishing drop. But there's a nice drop off right Indiana to that fourth tier, where half the conference almost is sitting in that fourth tier of college basketball, which is basketball purgatory.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think my question going back to this is, Buzz had a bad year, obviously. Rhodes's seat's got to be, on fire. Pat Kraft has got to be having some sort of arrangement being worked up right now. Yeah. Altman's a threat to retire. Northwestern will be better next year. Peichel has pretty much got his LinkedIn ready to update, looking for work. Yeah. Musselman might be in a similar position at some point. Yeah. But Washington, Tinkle. You're going to go down the list here. I think what just kind of jumps out with all of these programs, Mike, is just that it's like is that it wasn't very good for some of them, for most of them.
Yeah, well, it's something we talked about before about the variability of the portal. It's just going to create some exaggerated outcomes for a lot of teams compared to what we're used to maybe 10, 15 years ago. Yeah. Or you can have a new coach coming in that will have to basically be forced to take on heavy portal load. And again, we talk about batch dependency, that sometimes you're going to get a good batch, sometimes you're going to get a bad one, and you're not going to have a total control over exactly where the luck, kind of flips on that. Yeah, you're going to have some cases where teams are really just going to bottom out. And yeah, I think we saw Maryland this year with Buzz is probably emblematic of that kind of scenario where I don't think anyone really expected things to be that bad there.
Right.
But again, it's in this new environment, that's completely possible to happen, is where it's just because you just have no level of predictability when you're bringing in so many new pieces. Whereas in the past, at least you'd have 3 or 4 holdovers, maybe a few guys that can actually contribute, some semblance of cohesion and culture that still is maintained. But yeah, now everything is just kind of like a crapshoot. And you never know. Maybe Buzz has a little bit of an inverse next year of what he has this year. Maybe he gets a little bit lucky and has a little bit better recruiting on the upside. And yeah, maybe he wins 24, 25 games. You just don't know. And again, that's sort of the crazy nature of how the portal is really working these days. It's just the ceiling and the floor of programs are just widening out a lot more. And so it makes things much more interesting and fun. But yeah, as a fan, you have to be prepared for sometimes holy crap, we could really be scraping the bottom if we don't hit a good batch of recruits.
And coming attractions for the off season for Bob and Mike. We'll be talking a lot about having no money and no athletic direction or director. Yeah. I should say, but athletic direction.
I was like, no direction home. Or is this we're getting to the Bob Dylan?
I was going to use the Jerry Jeff Gonzo, discussion of Jerry Jeff Walker discussion of Gonzo, taking an unknown thing to an unknown place for a known purpose, and sometimes you get trapped in an unknown place with no known purpose.
Yeah,
many of these programs are trapped in an unknown place with no known purpose. So
and no money,
and no way to get out. You can't find, or as Steve Wynn was saying, can't find my way home.
So it sounds like a Johnny Cash song.
And
that may be the no money.
We will be talking about the SEC in the next segment. Yeah. So when we come back, we're going to jump into a few to more of the national look when we come back on X's and Joe's.
When the final buzzer sounds in Bloomington, the conversation starts here. The assembly call is IU basketball. Live post-game shows, smart midweek breakdowns, and no empty hot takes. Jared Morris, Coach Brian Tonsoni, Andy Bottoms, and Ryan Phillips dissect lineups, sets, and recruiting so you know what really happened and what it means for the Big Ten season, March, and beyond. Join the live chat on YouTube, then catch the podcast on Spotify and Apple. Just search Assembly Call and be part of Hoosier Nation's most trusted post-game tradition.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Weemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So, Bob, national view, peering back from the Big Ten of the Midwest to the SEC, Big 12, and the rest. I'm sort of curious about, the fact that, obviously the Michigan is sort of standing out in the Big Ten. And you're also seeing obviously like Arizona and Duke and some of these other teams are, kind of popping up. I'm starting to notice some patterns in terms of like the, let's say the I guess what is separating the elite teams from everyone else. What you said at the beginning of the show is that the top 2% is basically sort of leaving the bottom 98% in the dust. I would even say that the top 1% is actually separating itself from the top 2% and on down. And you look at the sort of the top of the grid here on the Ken Palm list. I want to start maybe with and we can go either one of these, but I want to talk about either Duke or Arizona next, in light of what we just talked about with Michigan. Maybe let's start with Duke. What are you seeing as far as what is making Duke kind of stand out, and what makes you think okay, if you had to make your sort of elevator pitch of why you think Duke's going to win the title, what would that sound like?
I think it's because they have a great deal of versatility while still being very reliant, or not even reliant, but running through a non-point guard player in Carlos Boozer Jr.
Yeah.
And I would kind of say that for them, he's so dynamic, much like Yaxel is for Michigan. I think there's a lot of similarities in how these two teams are constructed from that mindset, although Duke is smaller, but I think that they're more physical. I think that they're stronger in many respects. Mm-hmm. So that what they give up in length, they get back in strength and size. I think that now I would say the elevator pitch should be started with, this is before the injuries to Caleb Foster and Patrick Gamba. When you lose your lead guard, your starting lead guard, and your big man, basically your biggest block threat.
Yeah.
And not to say that Malik Brown can't come in, not to say that they can't figure out how to do that with who they have currently. But again, you were looking at a team that was, looking eight deep, and you lose two of them.
Right.
That's not easy to overcome. And even if they come back, they won't be 100% coming off of injury. But I think coming out, looking at how they've played, and looking at, from the early season to the end of the season, I think the big thing with this Duke team that really stands out is they shoot the ball extremely well. And they also, again, kind of that disparity you were talking about between the two, that they can also, they defend well too, but they also run a diversity of offense that isn't just reliant on a singular concept. They can play, because they can put Boozer in the post. They can put Boozer, they can put him in as a ball handler, a ball screener. They do a lot off ball. They're cutting their points off of cuts, or their possessions off of cuts that end in a cut or off ball screens is at 20% or so, which is really kind of that's high for college basketball today. So they're doing, they have a multitude of ways to hurt you. Yeah. But I think the backtrack, and I agree with Justin that, they've also lost by a combined 4 points. And that's hard. You have a team that, they find ways to win. Yeah. So all those things factoring in, taking that into account, I think that they have a lot to kind of show for themselves, and they're going to be an interesting team to kind of watch, see if they can, with all the adversity they're facing going into this conference tournament with the ACC, see if they can actually, go on a run and make it back and get number 6.
Right. Yeah.
Get Shire next.
Yeah, no, it's you're right for obviously highlighting Cam Boozer, because that kid's a freak. And I was just looking at his numbers last night. Do you know what his BPM was? Just estimate.
19, right? Or is it insanely high?
Yeah, it's 20.8.
Do I get the washer and dryer on The Price is Right along
You're
with
close
the
enough,
RV?
exactly.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I could get both. Yeah, I don't know if I'm both show. I don't.
You don't get both showcases, but you get one. Yeah. So he's at 20.8. Do you know what Zach Edey's was his senior year when he went to the final championship game?
Was that 19?
That was about 16.8. So he's
okay.
He's a full 4 points on box plus minus above where Zach Edey was when Zach Edey won his second of his National Player of the Year award. So that just shows you how impactful that kid is. You're thinking about why Duke is where it is. Because a lot, you look at them, you think okay, well, kind of looks like your standard Duke team. Okay, I have good guards. I've got decent big, but I think he's the one that really makes things stand out in a scary kind of way because he is so skilled, but he's just so physically built. I mean, he literally looks like he is a 5-year NBA veteran in terms of his body and his just ability to just not be knocked off, out of the post. And he has got great touch, great passing skills. He literally has one of those Oscar Robertson like feels to him in terms of like his ability just to light up the box score just across the line, assist, blocks, rebounds, field goals, getting getting the free throw line, whatever he needs to. It's just, he's statistically speaking, he's very scary.
He makes his teammates better. Much like Cooper Flagg made his teammates better. The question is, are his teammates as good as they were last year?
Right.
I would say I would like highlight two quick things here. You're looking at D1 experience and minutes continuity. D1 experience is always a concern at Duke because since Krzyzewski went to the one and done strategies back in the 2010s.
Yeah,
the minutes continuity is higher, I think, than what we're used to seeing out of Duke. So they have they had a little bit more coming back.
Yeah,
which I think has kind of helped them over the course of the year kind of deal with those issues.
Yeah.
We're going to get to Florida, but before we get to Florida, I want to quickly just talk about Arizona because you're talking about size. We talked about size of bigs of Florida. We're also going to talk about size in regards to Arizona.
Yeah.
And let me just quickly find them real quick. Let me go back to this. So Zona, almost the antithesis of the teams that we're talking about with 3-point shooting.
Yeah, because they don't shoot threes.
No, but I think what's fun about them, so a lot of teams will look to shoot first, drive second.
Yeah,
I think that they look to drive first, shoot second. So
they're
very selective. They're very selective from three.
They drive first. And if that doesn't work, then they throw it up against the rim and look for an offensive rebound dunk. And if that doesn't work, they might tip it out for maybe a 3-point shot. That's kind of their sequence, it seems.
Watching them a little bit before this podcast, I was just so amazed by the amount of space, the gaps that they get into. Just creating empty side actions, almost they trigger out of empty side action.
Yeah.
And really just when they do throw to the post, which they do more than most teams in the country, but it's not like standard stand on the block post where you're just standing there taking up space and stopping the driving lane. They use that post to open the driving lanes. They also do a really good job if someone switches on a ball screen of just getting the ball up over because they have enough length on the perimeter as well as enough length down low to get that pass up and over.
Yeah.
And I think that I think the biggest concern I have with them, and they play fast, they're good in transition. I just think they're shooting, and the shooting that they have available to them, I'm not sure if that's going to carry.
Yeah.
I put them up against Michigan. I'm not sure they have the firepower to beat Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, they have those statistics, or at least the statistical profile of what I always talk about. I guess the more reliable, but let's say not high ceiling sort of stats. They're really good at 2-point field goal efficiency. They're number 2 in the country in terms of 2-point attempts. When we're talking about,
right.
Well, what is their distribution? Yeah, they're the extreme the other direction versus like Nebraska or Wisconsin. They almost exclusively shoot twos. Yeah, Illinois. They're 358th in 3-point attempts. But they just kill you on anything inside the arc. They're really good at, they're second in the country in rebounding. They're 7th in field goal defense. So again, like what I said before, they hit a high percentage or they stop you from hitting a high percentage. They're 13th overall in overall field goal percentage. And they live at the free throw line. They're 11th in the country in free throw attempts. So they have what you might call the more stable metrics, the kind of things where they're not going to have a cold shooting night. It'll be interesting if teams can actually force them out of the lane. Can you stop them from getting offensive rebounds? Can you stop them from getting easy points to the basket? And also, most especially, keep them off the free throw line. If they go up against a team like you said, Bob, like maybe they go up against a Michigan, that could be a challenge for them. That will be sort of the hinge question. Can they get in the lane or not? If they can, then yeah, they might actually beat Michigan. If they can't, if they get kind of stymied and they're basically forced to hunt for some 3-pointers, then yeah, that might be where they get a problem. And also just the fact that as talented as they are, I mean, they are kind of a freshman-led team. I mean, 3 of their best 4 players are freshmen. It's Berries, Pete, and Karchenkov. And it's interesting, what we talked about, the sweet spot and, the problems of the past like decade or two of teams with too many freshmen just not being able to perform, at a elite national level consistently. I don't know if that's really going to carry as much as it used to, because so many of these young freshmen you're seeing coming through they just feel like they're different than the kids from the past. I mean, Braden Berry's like from Arizona. I mean, that kid looks like he plays like he's a junior at least. You're talking about
Wagler at Illinois is a great example of this too.
Exactly.
Like, another case for him as player of the year. There, if Lendenberg's not in the league, it's probably Wagler.
And Darius Acuff, I think, just won the SEC Player of the Year, and he's a freshman at Arizona. So yeah, I mean, we'll probably have a conversation about this at some point where the recalibration of the sweet spot will continue as the NIL changes, as the portal changes, but also the fact that, yeah, it just seems like a lot of these freshmen are a little bit different than what they've been. And yeah, Arizona definitely hit on 3 extremely talented freshmen, two domestically and one from overseas. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they perform once they go against teams that are a little bit more mature than them, like in terms of age, at least when we talk about like the Michigans and Floridas of the world.
Well, and even then, when you look at Michigan with Trey McKinney's performance this year, being a key contributor, it's more of a traditional one. But I think you bring up a good point that it's going to be kind of hard to. I think it's going to be hard to kind of discount freshmen until we see them being discounted. I'll put it that way. Because the other thing is, some of these freshman teams, Arizona and Duke, they're winning at an insanely high rate. High rate.
Yeah, and their numbers really reflect that it's not like a fluke. I mean, they literally are demonstrating themselves to being metrically the best teams in the country.
So again, going back to kind of Trilly Donovan had this conversation earlier this year about teams being bigger and playing more size. And Florida's another one that kind of runs into that. Except again, much like Florida last year, they're playing a pretty good amount of guys who are 6. They've got guys who are. There's really not an in between with Florida. Either you're pushing 7 foot or you're under 6'5". There's not that
much. Yeah.
You don't really see that Stephon Castle type of player playing for Florida right now. Should be noted, they got better as the season progressed against what is more depleted than last year, but still a very formidable SEC.
Yeah. Yeah. They, when I look at Florida, just like metrically, I just think they're freakish at rebounding. That's kind of where they win. They're the number 1 team in the country in rebounding. And you're right. Their size is just kind of overwhelming. I mean, especially offensive rebounding. I mean, they're number 2 on offensive rebounding. And we talked about this before about how disproportionate of an advantage metrically you get for teams that can rebound, not offensive rebound, not being decent at offensive rebound, but being elite at that. It's very hard to not be a top 10 team if you have like top 5 offensive rebounding capability. It's just very difficult not to be in that conversation. That's kind of where Florida is.
Their bigs run the floor too in transition. That's huge.
Yeah.
Their bigs run the floor in transition too. So it's not like you're not dealing with like Oscar Clough big, where it's just he'll get there, but the destroyers and the carrier group gets there first.
Yeah.
But I was going to put Boogie Fland, I would say, has not turned out to be the player that they thought he'd be, like as a replacement for Walter Clayton Jr.
Yeah, well, I mean, Clayton like won a national championship, not necessarily by himself, but was kind of the leader of that. So that's not necessarily a
well.
Dark
you have 40%, but what I'm saying is you have 40% of minutes continuity, and the question would be, could Fland elevate his game at the end of this to be the lead guard they need to win a national title? And I think that's the question mark I'm looking for here, because I think right now they look a lot like Carolina in the late 2010s with the amount with 3-point shooting plus the size.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of a lazy comparison, but it's what I've got. But I'm looking at Florida right now and just asking that question of that X factor that got him through last year. Yeah, exactly. And Flan was almost a Hoosier. We remember that well.
How can we forget that?
How can we forget that?
That was a whole week of rending of cloth, I think.
We almost got a Whataburger too in Indiana, but I'll leave that one.
Right.
I'll let that one go. And a Dairy Queen next to it. But I think that there's a thing where I look at Florida and kind of have the point that I think they're dangerous because they're winning at an insane rate right now. But I also think that it's just there may be some flaws there when you look at the other three that we talked about may not be completely there.
Yeah, the thing that will stand out as far as a scouting report issue with Florida is that their guards can't shoot from deep. Flan's at 23% and Lee's 27%. So yeah, it's a little bit like, what we were saying with Arizona is that if they run into a team that is just as tall, strong, athletic as they are at the 3, 4, 5 position.
Yeah.
And they've got at least guards that are pretty decent at keeping them in front of them, then at some point, the shots that are going to be most available to them are probably going to be 3-pointers, and the other team is going to be happy if Lee and Fland are taking a lot of those.
Right. So quickly, Houston and Purdue kind of started the year 1 and 2 at the top of metrics and AP and etc. Houston, I think their intentionality in bringing in freshmen and bringing in especially Kingston Flemings was to increase that their offensive efficiency into that top 10. They didn't get they got close. I think they're better offensively than they were a year ago in some respects. I think that they're less connected, but more. I think they have more potential talent, but they're less connected than they were a year ago. That would be my assessment of how they're playing.
Yeah, well, they just lost. They
lost a lot.
They lost a lot of the core of what they had last year in the team that went to the championship game. I mean, you're right. It's Kelvin Sampson's trying to merge 3 elite 5-star recruits with basically the leftover core of Sharp, Buzan, and Tugler.
Sharp and Tugler. Yeah.
So that's kind of, and that's not an easy task, but I mean, I would say Kingston Fleming is really impressive for what I think Houston is trying to do. I think if they were to make a run, it's going to be like that kid really kind of taking over at certain points, which is kind of interesting because then you contrast that with Emmanuel Sharp still being on the team, and he's sort of like the quote unquote senior leader. So I think the dynamic between those two is going to determine like how far they go, because it feels like at times where Fleming is probably physically the one that can just get by his guy and it just has more of a ceiling, but Sharp is much more tested and a little bit more familiar with, making a run in March. So, that's going to be the thing to watch for.
But looking at him over the course of the season, what's impressive about Kelvin Sampson here is just how he was able to get this young group connected on defense.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that they're playing defensively, plus offensively, not turning the ball over as much, at all, really.
Yeah,
and they are, but relative to the field, relative to the conversation, they've kind of improved in areas that they've needed to improve in. From a standpoint of, I would just, kind of just say that, they even though they're not as dynamic as to and how they've done. And what they've done with some of the turnover, although they're still incredibly dynamic. I shouldn't say that. What I should really say is I don't think their shooting got up to the level that Sampson wanted it to get to, is what I'm trying to say. And right. I think that they still have, they're still very dangerous. Like they can knock off a 1 seed, but I don't know if they can knock off multiple 1 seeds.
Right. Yeah, you kind of like what we said in the preseason pod, where Kelvin goes to the championship game and you kind of feel like he's almost hitting, I won't say the ceiling, but there's only so much you can do out of constructing a roster where you're just maximizing on rebounding and defense. And obviously him getting more offensive talent has always kind of been the theory of getting him to a national championship. And so
right.
I mean, so yeah, again, we always talk about trade-offs. His trade-off is obviously, okay, it's going to sacrifice probably a little bit of like strength, a little bit of experience, take on some of these like elite freshmen and just see where it goes. And so, yeah, that's ongoing question of like where that lands.
So real quick, put up Iowa State, who I thought at one time was probably one of the best 4 teams in the country. I think that the conversation we just had about Kelvin Sampson is true about Otzelberger right now there, where he's still trying to figure out how to get a higher firepower offense into his defensive scheme.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it almost seems like, this is Houston and Ames in some respects, doesn't it?
Yeah. You watch the games that when Iowa State loses, again, like so many of the best players that they have are bigs that can shoot threes. Momcilovic and Jefferson specifically. Lipsy is maybe the best defensive guard in the country. He's great at stopping their team's point guard. And you're right, in terms of defensive overall, I mean, they're just great at just kind of locking you down. But I think their problem is that they're just like so inconsistent because they just can't generate a lot of like easy offense unless it's Jefferson like driving the ball into traffic and getting to the free throw line. Momcilovic is not like a guy that's going to like, do a shot fake, go in and like, dunk over people, like, heading to the rim. It's just not, he's not that kind of player. So so I think defensively they're well established. Offensively, they function if they're hitting their threes. And when they're not, then it's a problem.
So again, I was going to say with Milivojevic, he doesn't need to. I just saw this and I'm about to I about hit my head against my computer passing out of shock. I've never seen a 3-point percentage like this in this century with this volume.
Yeah.
He's 114 for 228 for 50% from beyond the arc.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, a 6'8" kid, so if the theory that TJ has is you can defend yourself to a national title with decent offense, that kid right there just says you can't do that anymore. You have to have good defense, very good defense, but you're not going to defend your way to a title.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we talk about the reliability of offense, right? I mean, what you see so often in a lot of these good teams is that, it's not so much what number you hit in the aggregated metrics. It's
right.
Like, what is your floor game to game when you're going up against good competition in terms of just getting reliable offense, especially again, the biggest hinge variable in any game when it comes to offense is, are you hitting your shots from the outside? That's typically what you just get, where games are often like won or lost on big swings. You win game by 20, you lose by 20. Oftentimes it's like, yeah, well, one game we went 11 for, 25 from 3. And the next one we went like, 3 for 17. I mean, it's just like, the kind of the way things work in terms of the numbers. But you're right. I mean, I think it's always kind of get back to the idea that when things aren't going well, what can you rely on? And you were kind of talking about that in your quick hit you did the other day about, okay, well, what teams win in March? Like, what are the ones, what is sort of the design of how the offense works once you get sort of like the last 5 minutes of the game and the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four. A lot of times, yeah, it's like it's a guard, it's a wing that gets a high ball screen and just you can't stop him. He gets to the line if he's not making those shots, or you're so overcommitting to him that you're leaving a wide open 3-point shooter that you cannot possibly leave open that often. And if that doesn't work, then you've got a big that, dunks, the offensive rebound back in after there's a miss. I mean, that's kind of the way things work. And that's where you kind of have to think about like teams like Iowa State. They're just like one step below the kind of like Michigan, Arizona, Duke kind of teams that have that reliability. Right. They're close. They have a ceiling that's kind of in the same neighborhood as those elite teams, but they're just, the reliability just isn't there for them.
There are just enough few there's whereas instead of a 6-lane highway, you're dealing with a 4-lane highway for them. Is really what I think the best way to. That's how I would look at it.
Yeah, no, that's very true.
Okay, so we're going to skip the last one on the 8 here because we'll talk about them 8 and 9 some point. We'll leave UConn for a little bit here, but I wanted to quickly just talk about Louisville and Kentucky for just a brief moment. And we talked about them a little bit in the kind of the chip stack conversation. But I thought Louisville was interesting in that had Michael Brown not gone down with injury the way that he did, I think they would have probably been a little better. But I think for Pat Kelsey, this was a year that shows that with maybe a little more reliability and size, and also being a little more reliability in length, he could have found himself in a position, because I'm looking at the depth chart. This does not really look like, although you have Ruths down there, and he didn't play a whole heck of a lot when you really think about it. Like Connie Ruths, who I believe returned, he came, he started a couple games for him, but yeah, he was there last year. Kind of hit a sophomore slump a little bit. He got better, but it was they found just better playing small, in an era where playing small hasn't exactly paid off for a lot of teams.
Yeah,
at least not like it traditionally did.
Yeah, well, I think Louisville in a way is almost after Brown went down, or at least like when he got his injury and he's kind of been hobbled by that. In a way, it's almost like they're a little bit like a version of IU, except maybe slightly better. They hunt threes, they shoot threes pretty well when they're open. They just have trouble being able to create the kind of opportunities inside the 3-point line, and their bigs just don't really match up well against some of the more elite teams. And that's again been a problem that Kelsey's had over his career, is that he just doesn't beat good teams, but he can throttle bad to mediocre teams. And if you think about like Louisville this year, I mean, they had so many examples of that. Like in January, they had that run where, let's see, they lost at home to Virginia by like 9.
Right.
And then they go on the road immediately against Pittsburgh, and they beat them by like 41 points.
Yep.
You think, oh man, okay, everything's back on track. And then they go down to Duke and play in Durham and get throttled by 31 again. And so it's this sort of there's certain types of teams that sort of have that quality. And unfortunately, IU's kind of like, basically in that category, is that they have really good skill. And when they're playing against teams that are basically at the same level and echelon of like physicality, athleticism, then all their stuff kind of works, and it basically becomes almost like a game of horse. And when you have good shooters, then okay, yeah, you can really put a high number on teams. But the moment you go up against teams that actually are, at least one standard deviation stronger than you, faster than you, then all that gets shut down, and then they force you to drive. And if you can't drive, then you're kind of screwed.
So on the opposite end of that, I would say is Kentucky, who the $22 million beast.
Yep.
And you look at where they are, where it just seems they had a bunch of pieces that just didn't fit. Yep. And you can argue Lowe going down with that injury was huge for him, or being injured was huge. Cam Williams, with the injuries that he dealt with, were huge. You can go down that.
And Quinton's is probably the biggest one. I mean, he was expected to be literally their best player, and he didn't play.
And he never showed. Yeah, he couldn't play. So, but even in spite of that, you still had what looked to be a pretty decent group, and it just hasn't come together the way I think fans there expect it to, especially what they're investing in the program.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about like going into the season, you assume that, let's say, Denzel Aberdeen would probably be their 4th or 5th best player, and you'd have been okay with that. But then after all those injuries, now he's your 2nd best player. And so I think there's just this cascading problem of, it's not just that you have one injury. It's like when you have 2 or more, and those are your guys at the top of your depth chart, then it causes problems like all the way down. So you're just like taking a cut everywhere in the lineup. And like Atega Owe is a really great player, but he's not so good that he can basically be, the 1 and 1A on a team that's going to be like a 2 or 3 seed. That
right.
essentially is what Kentucky fans were kind of hoping for. Now, again, it's hard to play, the Earth 2.0 game and assume like, okay, well, if they had Quintance and they had Lowe, I think they would have been at, X level. I mean, you don't know for sure, but you can say with like some confidence the fact that, okay, those 2 guys were considered to be probably 2 of the best 3 players on the team. They go down with injury. Any team that suffers that circumstance is going to take a really big hit in terms of their win total. And so I think Kentucky just got hit with that. But unfortunately for Pope, it's like, the fan base, again, he is where he is in terms of his timeline at Kentucky. And fans are like, okay, we're already getting annoyed with this already.
Well, and again, you had an incredible, you overperformed year 1, underperformed year 2. I would go to this as being a light at the end of the tunnel for him. Owe and Aberdeen leave. But it's highly possible that if they can find a way to bring the nucleus of this group back. They're young. Mm-hmm. And by young, I mean, Chandler is a sophomore, 40, at times was probably one of their better, was actually a really good option for them out on that wing. Yeah. Aberdeen would have, he's gone, but then, with Moreno as a center, because you lose Quaintance, but you keep Moreno. And there may be a way to play the 2 of them together next year. Diobate has another year coming at him. You have, and even Jalen Lowe, may come back for that 4th year. So I mean, you've got some options where it's like next year could be better. Next year could be a lot better for him.
Absolutely,
and I think that's what they're banking on. And so as we kind of go down into that, we look at and Kentucky's a good example of this. The sort of Big 12, ACC the SEC Big 12 middle that you see here in many respects, or at least with Kansas, kind of going to BYU. Some of these programs, it's been kind of this weird sort of up and down. Like we talked about at the start of the show about the difference between the top, what you see here, just go even the top 6, where you have, 8 points of net rating. Mm-hmm. And then you go here, what 8 points get you is all the way to 24, which is now out of the top 5%.
Right.
And it's not like, and these are good teams, but it's just, they're not teams that are, I think it's very hard for me to see one of these teams breaking out into a Final Four run, because I think winning 4 straight is going to be hard for most of them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of in the mode of thinking analytically, like, okay, well, what's going to happen that's going to cause like Duke, Michigan, Arizona, and Florida to lose? I think at least 2 of those teams are probably going to be locked in the Final Four. Of course, again, we never say never, obviously. I mean, it's all like probability. Right. It's just that, again, getting back to sort of like, where teams' ceilings and floors exist. I feel like the floor for some of these like top 2 or 3 teams are just so high. And it's just going to take a team that has just the right level of physicality, and they're probably going to have to hit a lot of shots against this team, and hope the other team is just like missing a lot too. So we'll see.
We'll see. But I would just say overall on performance, they've actually provided some really good basketball throughout the course of the year, but it's also been, a lot of teams just beating up on each other. And we've seen that especially in the Big Ten too, where you just have a lot of programs that any given night it's rough, unless you were Michigan or one of the top 3 teams, and even Florida now is 4, unless you're in that really tip top any given night, and those teams found ways to win even in those close situations. So it's a matter of who has the weaponry to be able to go forward with it.
Exactly.
But I do think, statistically, we saw 3-point shooting go up more this year. Took another slight, the upward trend is moving up. Yeah. I do think we've seen a lot more. I feel like we're seeing more Princeton-esque versus dribble drive-esque type of offense. I still think you're seeing a lot of dribble drive, but I also think that teams are throwing in more of the conceptual stuff out of the Princeton ideas, with a lot more off-ball cutting, a lot more off-ball screening, and really just kind of getting their players in positions there. But like a team like Tennessee, with the type of motion they run, I just don't see, I don't see this being the year they make the Final Four. I see that they had a good year, but not a great year.
Well, yeah, and Nate Ahmet just went down with an injury, so they're screwed offensively.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so that kind of takes them out there. Briefly about the Big East, because the Big East, as I think we've opined, and my view on the Big East, you always have kind of 4 mansions and a shanty town.
Yeah.
I think we had 3 mansions, a nice split level, and a shanty town.
Yeah. Well, like I'm glad you moved to like shanty town rather than the trailer park.
I'm not going to say that. Yeah. It's just,
well,
nice
also just like if I explain that to people out where I live, it's like, well, trailer park, what? Well, where do we have that? You don't have a lot of trailer parks in North Jersey, let me put it that way. So
no, there wouldn't be. Well, I think, and I kind of do that because there are a lot of really nice ones, down in Florida, especially down by the beach. I mean, heck, Rockford lived in a good one. So
tenement housing, you could say.
And actually, Rockford is that was California. So before somebody corrects me as you're listening, but that to me, the Big East is one of those conferences that. You have St. John's in Connecticut. Villanova definitely did well getting Willard in. But I think a lot of that comes down to they were able to beat each other. They were able to do a good job of beating up on each other. Yeah. And then had 3 teams that were just able to kind of separate themselves from the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
I saw Creighton play a couple times this year. They were interesting. They just had too much fire. That came up in the Discord why they didn't go well. Yeah, they lost a lot of firepower. That's my thing. They lost a lot of, and that was defining firepower that they lost.
Yeah, I mean, Kalkenbrenner is probably the best, Creighton player that's played in God knows like how long. So yeah, you lose someone like that, it's going to completely change the dynamics of your team. And I mean, they still had good shooters. I mean, they brought in Josh Dix and all that. But again, with Creighton this year, they really got decimated at the 5. I mean, Jackson McAndrews, their stud sophomore big, who they think is going to be, at least they're praying is going to be the next Kalkenbrenner. And he got injured 4 games in the season. And then Owen Freeman, who they brought in from Iowa, who would be the other big that they could use, he got injured as well. So yeah, they just couldn't keep things going with the injuries they had. So.
And Nick Graves just didn't shoot the ball well enough. I mean, there's a whole litany. Plus, their preseason schedule was, by in many respects, murder.
Yeah,
for them, it was murder. Which was just hard for them to kind of get through. Yeah. Real fast, we talked about Butler at one point. When we did chip stacks to start the season, kind of a rough year there again. So we'll kind of see where that program kind of goes, but. I think on the whole, if we look at this at kind of that sort of top group in Ken Palm, and Torvik is very similar. Real fast, I wanted to mention BYU. That was another example of, again, 3-point shooting teams. Although their 3-point percentage wasn't nearly as high as it was in other places.
Yeah,
but
I mean, their problem is that Richie Saunders got injured. And he was kind of the glue guy, senior on the team. And I think when he went down, it just kind of throttled the whole sort of continuity and cohesion of the team. And obviously, AJ DeBonsa is probably going to be like the number 1 or 2 pick, and he's just freakishly elite, freshman kid. And there's such a lot of put on a freshman, to lead a team like that, which does not have as much firepower as let's say that Boozer has at Duke with him,
right?
Or where the Arizona kids, where Barry's has that many other elite kids with him in Arizona. So yeah, I think it was just a combination of injuries and just some breaking up of the roster, unfortunately, hit them mid-season.
So we'll dive a little bit into that kind of tier just briefly as we wrap up when we come back on X's and Joe's.
Hoosier Nation, want a smarter take on IU sports? Then check out Crimson Cast, your go-to podcast for Indiana football, basketball, and beyond. Hosts Galen Clavio and Scott Caulfield bring you game previews, instant reactions, history, and context to make Indiana sports come alive. From the biggest moments on the field to the storylines shaping the future, Crimson Cast keeps you informed and connected. And after years of saying bring back the Bison, IU actually did it. So if IU listens to Crimson Cast, maybe you should too. Just search Crimson Cast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube.
Welcome back to X's and Joe's. I'm Mike Weemuth, joined by Coach Bob Moats. So, Bob, wrapping up and looking at the bottom tier of the of the Ken Pom list here. Yeah.
I mean, we go further. We kind of talked a little about four, but you don't want to be in basketball purgatory, but just that level above purgatory. Do the math. From St. John's to Missouri is a gap of 9, and this is usually true in net rating, I might add. This is not always. This is not totally out of line that you see this much this closeness. But you compare that to what 9 gets you here, and that just from where Duke and Michigan are basically to 6. And here you have a whole, as I've been calling it, a stinking pile of indistinguishable mediocrity. Would be kind of, and I don't even want to call it average, because I think in so many ways these teams have some above average characteristics. They've done some things extremely well. They've had some of them have had some really big wins. And we talked about a couple of them in depth, but just generally as a group, it's funny. We were talking, it was like IU, even where it stands now, they beat Northwestern. They could still make the tournament at 19 and 13.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And it's, it's the funny thing about the tournament and where the red line is basically between the NIT and the tournament, where the bubble exists. It's, I would say it's not a fixed finish line where everyone's like racing towards one spot. It's basically, it's essentially a survival contest between teams to see who's going to screw up less than the other ones in competition.
And back to the a lot of it's like back to the 70s and 80s when we were watching IndyCar. You remember growing up as a kid in Indiana, and there were 4 days of qualifications. And the first day was always exciting because it was pole day. And then second day and third day were kind of like, we'll fill in the rest of the field with some guys who are going to try to make some extra money, try to finish in the top 10. And then you had bump day. And bump day was always incredibly exciting because up until 5 o'clock when the gun went off, you had guys, putting duct tape on their cars to try to get it to qualify. Yeah. And, you had
taking out second mortgages to get a car.
Exactly. And you had 7 Dick Simon drivers doing that with Johnny Rutherford sitting in the cockpit ready to go. And it was one of those types of deals where that's kind of how the bubble works. Like, I mean, and that's, I think, where people look at, well, where do you see upsets coming? It's hard to see them. Although in this group, a lot of these teams have done really well beating teams that are kind of in that sort of low major area. Where they've taken hits has been against those sort of high major teams in this area, in this zone, or even a little below it. But pointing out St. Louis real quick, who's had a really good year with Josh with Schurz, and who will probably not be at St. Louis next year, based on that. But taking out the West Coast Conference and the Mountain West, that is your highest, what you would call low to mid, or kind of the highest mid-type major. I'm sorry, that's A10. So it's kind of the same thing. Yeah. But not really, because that's your highest A10 team, and so the A10 has dropped off. You don't see a Valley team up here like you've seen in years past. You don't really,
Mountain West,
Yeah, you've got a couple A10 teams and the Mountain West, and so it's kind of just, it's almost like high majors and that sort of next tier group of 5 types of programs that are there with one A10, and the Big East is its own little weird thing. But
well, it's not coincidental that so many of the best players from the Mountain West and A10 are flowing upwards to these teams you're seeing above them in the Ken Pom list. And so again, it's sort of the cutthroat nature of the portal is that it's just creating this upflow of talent from the mid majors to the more let's say the higher echelon teams in the Power 5.
Agreed. And again, it's also a thing where out of that group that we're talking about in this sort of tier 3 of that next 10%, that's kind of that 6 seed to really the low end of the bubble. some of those teams could break through into that top 5 next year. A lot of them could break through. We saw that with Florida when they won the national championship last year. They went from 90 something in KenPom to a 7 seed to a national title winner. Yeah. And so I think that the portal affords you that. Some of the getting seasoning, like we were talking about with Kentucky, can get you that. I did want to just briefly touch on Miami because I think it's a nice story.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.
It's a nice story.
Yeah. Well, my nephew runs track at the Miami of Ohio. So and he also won the last year. He won the Weymouth family NCAA pool. So I must mention that and give him ultimate respect, and will not besmirch Miami of Ohio during this conversation. So
and will not besmirch him. Although my nieces and my nephew now are going to Ohio University, and
That's
they,
right, yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I do actually own one of their t-shirts, so I can actually, fit in with my wife's side of the family. But
do you think it's, I mean, obviously there's a debate about Miami of Ohio and do they belong in it or not? And I'm sort of split on that in the sense that, do I think if you played Miami against some of the bubble teams that Miami would win? I would probably say no. Do I think that Miami should be in the tournament? I would say yes. Especially
it's the Indiana State argument, isn't it? Yeah. It's the Indiana State
argument. No. Forget the Indiana State argument. It's the Indiana football argument. We've been spending 2 years basically screaming at the national media is like, wins matter. Like all you can do is beat the teams that are in front of you.
That's true.
And you're gonna punish teams that we won everything we were supposed to win that was placed in front of us. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like as a matter of just basic metrics, yeah, I think you put Miami of Ohio against some 7, 8, 9 seeds, they're probably going to get beat. But yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's not always about just who you think is quote unquote going to win the next game. Is you have to make them regular season matter some. And that applies to college basketball the same way it does to college football.
So the con on that is looking at the control they have over their non-con, and looking at their non-conference schedule. Would it have cost? I mean, you didn't have to get a hotel to go play at Xavier this year.
Yeah,
go to Xavier, beat them. I'm probably you should be in. Go to UC and beat them. You're probably in my estimation. Go to Ohio State and play them close. You're probably in my estimation. Come over to Bloomington and play us. Yeah, you have to get a hotel for that one.
Yeah.
But, I mean, heck, play Dayton. It's right down the road. I mean, play them.
Yeah.
Somebody.
I totally agree with that.
Outside of that, I mean, they played, IU East. IU East for IU is a exhibition game. That is an NAIA school. They're a good NAIA school. They're in the Crossroads Conference in NAIA, probably the best basketball conference in the country. Small and non-division one.
Right.
You can't argue with the Crossroads. But that game is in their metric. That game is in their metrical profile.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they haven't earned a spot. What I'm saying is that if you're looking at this from a standpoint of, I do think the con on that is they had more control over getting more money for the swim team and for your nephew at track by going up and getting their, and playing at the Cintas Center than they do playing. And I've been to and Miami's a great campus, but it's versus playing Arkansas Pine Bluff after Mercyhurst.
Right. Yeah, no, it's also interesting. This is a sort of a theoretical question. How much different if they had lost one game?
Oh, it's probably a game change based on the schedule.
I think so. Yeah, if they had lost any of those games, then I think that really changes the dynamic. Because again, when you go undefeated, I mean, literally, that is a team that has done everything that is within the power to to influence on their actual schedule that they play. Now, again, you can ding them for not playing more difficult teams in the preseason, but yeah, again, it's one of these. It's an interesting argument. I can totally go on the other side of the argument and say they don't.
And I could do. I could. I could
Yeah,
too.
I could. Yeah, I mean, I could make a very good case that Miami doesn't belong in based upon what I think their actual metrics are. But again, I think it's just ironic. We as IU fans have been spending so much time, like, haranguing the national media about like wins matter, wins matter. So yeah, it's I'll leave it at that.
I'll just say this: is how many times is situational hypocrisy wrong? On the next episode of X's and Joe's, we're going to go into the we're going to go into the existential conversation of when is it okay to change your mind or be a hypocrite.
well, again, like remember when I was talking about rivalries, I said that
right, yeah,
Boston is the perfect example of hypocrisy in sports when it comes to rivalries, because when it's Red Sox season and they're facing the Yankees, well, then that's when they're the rebellion. We are fighting the Death Star as the Yankees.
Right.
Football season comes around, they take off their Luke Skywalker helmet and they put on their Darth Vader helmet. It's like, yes, screw you guys. It's like, you hate us because you ain't us.
Yeah.
we are the dark side. Look at our rings. I don't care if we cheated to get them. Again, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's like if you're a sports fan, we're all defense attorneys making the best case for why our team deserves some kind of consideration or some kind of like excuse to get whatever, a tournament bid or a spot in the championship. And then once the logic flips, once we go to one of our other teams and that same logic actually works against us, well, of course that logic is stupid.
and also, just accepting the fact that the MAC schedule basketball schedule compared to the Big Ten football schedule might be a little different.
Yeah.
Just as an aside. But I'm okay if we would have, but again, if our football program was to play Nebraska Barbers and Teachers College a couple more times this year, I'm okay with that, just so we don't get tripped up against, I don't know, Texas or Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So we'll be back next week to talk a little bit more about really when the bracket comes out. And, we were trying, and that's going to be kind of to shape up the bracket, kind of talk about some of the decision making on that. There'll also be, I think, an IU postmortem coming up, that postmortem on the season.
Point. Yeah.
So we'll go ahead and kind of break that down a little more and probably throw in a little bit of comps between Michigan State and Purdue for the heck of it. They'll come up at some point.
Yeah. I'll do a quick hitter probably sometime later this week discussing, I guess, sort of roster capacity and talking about I use roster issues this year, but also how they kind of compare with IU roster issues of the past, and just try to get an understanding of like, how what's going on now with IU is not something new. And we'll kind of go into a little bit of numbers and looking at that. So it'll be fun.
And yeah, we'll be anyway. So we'll also be cranking out some content here and there throughout the next few days, especially as conference basketball, conference tournament basketball keeps rolling. Yep. So we may see a couple more of those moving on. And on that note, I want to thank Bob Thompson for the sound and music of the show, and John Ringer of ringdesign.com for the logo and look of the show.
Yep. And this endless conversation was brought to you by the Back Home Network. Be sure to check out all the great BHN content, including Assembly Call, Doing the Work, The Dribble Drive, Big Red Carpet, our new show, Raise the Flag, Sideline Stories, Football Weather, and Crimson Cast on YouTube and at backhomenetwork.com. So until next time, I'm Mike Weemuth.
I'm Bob Moats.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy your march.